Hi, I'm Pam Flannery, and welcome to a brand new podcast, Moving Mountains, celebrating wins that different churches and the church as a whole have experienced, particularly over this past year. In this podcast, I get the amazing opportunity to talk with pastors from all over the country, from many different denominations and backgrounds, and I look forward to listening along with you as they share with us how they overcame challenges during these uncertain times. Each month, you'll hear stories that inspire you and your leaders, prompting fresh ideas for your ministry. Welcome to Moving Mountains. Today, I have the honor to introduce you to Pastor Josh Street, Finance and Operations Pastor at Northstar Church in Panama City, Florida. Welcome, Josh.
It's great to be here, Pam.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. This is our first Move Mountains Pastor podcast, and this was birthed out of a desire to encourage pastors and ministry leaders who have faced challenges, circumstances that allow them to just press forward instead of retreating. They trusted God and they experienced those mountains move. And of course, we know God moved them, but it was the faithfulness of pastors and leaders. So Northstar has had several huge mountains, starting in 2018 with Hurricane Michael, which I believe was number 3 most powerful storm in U.S. history. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you tell us a little bit first about yourself, about your church, and then just what happened when Hurricane Michael hit?
So I'm kind of homegrown to our community. I've lived here most of my life. My family's been here for a couple generations. And so hurricanes were not something that's uncommon. I think I've been through about 6 in my lifetime, but nothing like what we experienced on October 10th. We were actually in our church building when the storm hit. It moved from a Category 2 to a Category 5 within a few hours. For people that know things about hurricanes, they typically decrease in strength before they hit. This one didn't. This one was an anomaly, and when it came through our community, it was the most destructive thing any of us have ever experienced. And that left our community immediately thereafter without cell service for almost a month. Many of us didn't have power. Well, everyone didn't have power, including our emergency services, you name it, National Guard, Air Force Base, Navy Base. No one had it. Every telephone pole was broken. We lost almost, I think, 80% of our trees. Our community looks completely different than what it did 3 years ago.
That's scary. And I shared with you how I'd like to maybe move to Florida. And then I hear these stories and go, no, I'm going to stay in Colorado. Oh, gosh. How were you able? I know that your church has a real passion for people. So how were you
Mhm.
able to be the church during those, I think it was 3 years or more, wasn't it?
So right after the storm, if you're talking about how you be the church when you don't have power, when you don't have internet, when you don't have cell service, when you don't have anything. I mean, it's not like we had volunteers to pull from. They were dealing with things at their house. So how that looked was our worship pastor had a team of people that were climbing up on roofs and nailing down tarps. Our senior pastor was driving a forklift.
Wow.
Our
Hmm.
our spiritual development pastor was going door to door asking people in the community what they needed. We were trucking in stuff from every place you could possibly think of. We had to drive an hour away in order to be able to make phone calls. So we had some of our staff that was doing that so that we could even coordinate to get things into our community. So it was when I look back on it, we're still doing things that we did even then. I mean, we're still asking people what they need. When COVID hit, I mean, we looked at each other and we didn't chuckle because it was a serious issue, but we looked at each other and said, well, we've done this before. We didn't have a building before. So what difference is this? We've been portable for 3 years and so let's figure this out. How do we do this? And so how you be the church when something like that happens, you just realize that it was never about a building and it's never about even the people that you can recruit. It's about what you're willing to do for your community and how you're willing to serve it.
Wow. That's the heart of the kingdom, isn't it? Not the 4 walls of the church. As you had several campuses, right?
We do. Yes, we still do. So
How many do you have, and how many were completely destroyed?
we have three campuses. Two of them sustained catastrophic damage. One of them sustained heavy structural damage, but we were still able to meet in it. So, I mean, we were having church for, well, we've had church for several years with a wall kind of leaning in, but
Wow.
like, I know that doesn't sound, that's not, for me, from a financial and operations pastor, that sounds really dangerous. But you know what? Like, when all your buildings in your entire city are damaged, I mean, it's you don't have a choice, and everybody knows that you've got to have a place for people to meet and people to go. And our kids have gone into in schools that haven't been the safest. Our government has had to meet in buildings that aren't in the greatest condition. And we've met outside at times, we've met inside at times. So it's just, you do what you got to do. Right now, our community only has one structure, the entire metropolitan area, that can hold more than 400 people. And most of the churches in our area were in the same boat. So it wasn't even like we could share space with other churches. Any building that was of any significant size got catastrophic damage. And so we were all in the same boat. So we had to work together, and we had to share spaces, and we had to share resources, and we had to work like we never worked before. And that's got a lot of positives to it. And I kind of hope that the kingdom, and the kingdom that exists here, realizes that we need each other, and we don't go back to our pockets and our own little mini kingdoms, but we recognize how much we need to rely on each other. And it's not competition, and we're all better for it.
Yeah, community, that's a key word. I so appreciate that. And I see that more even here in Colorado Springs. When COVID hit, it was huge for our entire nation.
Hmm.
And I know that one of your campuses, you meet at a school. The church that I was going to at the time met in a college. And of
Hmm.
course, we couldn't meet any longer. And
Hmm.
that brings additional challenges. Some of those challenges you talked to me earlier about finding sanitation, a
Hmm.
sanitation process that was inexpensive and helped you to reopen your church safer. And
Hmm.
can you share that? Because I know there's a lot of pastors and leaders right now that still have concerns. What if we open and we're not providing everything we need for people to feel safer? So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
So, yes, and there's a little bit of philosophical and vision behind that. So, we believe, and I think we all do as believers, that God never takes us through something without a reason for doing it. And
Mhm.
so we always ask the question when we have something that is set before us that's even beyond our control: God, what are you trying to teach us through this? And I think after COVID, it was, how do we keep our people safe? That our facilities and coming to church is the safest thing that they can do, because frankly, a lot of people were told not to do it. so,
Yeah.
so we had to
Mhm.
address that. And so we went back to the drawing board, and we started researching, and as I'm sure a lot of people have, how do you make stuff safe? And we worked a lot with our local health officials. We were a mask church. I mean, I know people think that that's, some people are for it, some people are against it, those type of things. But we just recognize that, look, whether it works or whether it doesn't, this is something we can do to help people feel safe. But even before that, we had to research, what kind of cleaning materials do you use, and which ones can you use on fabric so that we don't damage the facility that we're in. And so in that research, we found some tools that were more affordable than I would have ever thought. And some were practiced in hospitals and other buildings for decades, but we didn't know about them. And so a lot of our rooms, because we're a contemporary, modern, progressive church, we operate in the dark a lot. so, so, and what we've learned, even through hurricanes and now with COVID, that's not always a good thing. So we had to flex a little bit, and we said, you know what? Sunlight actually is a natural remedy to a lot of disease and viruses. And so the first modification that we did, and what we have committed to in all of our buildings, is that we get natural light as much as we can in our buildings. Now, we can control that with blinds and electronics and things like that. But natural light is a huge part of combating viruses. And so that was one. The second thing is natural air. We live in a beautiful area of our country. We have a temperate climate. but we weren't really taking that into account when we were building our buildings. We were always trying to just keep the AC on, and we decided that we're going to try to create a more natural flow of air into our structures. And those may be out of reach for a lot of churches and things like that. But what's not out of reach for everyone is a couple things. I mean, the cleaning supplies, they're a couple $100 and it takes you through a couple of months. So it's not like we can't get these things and
Right.
clean and sanitize our facilities. But that doesn't address what's in the air. And that was one that we talked a lot about, is how do we create cleaner air even in our months that we can't allow fresh air to come in our facilities. And we discovered a few tools that are made to specifically do that. And they involve UVC light. It's a component of natural sunlight that we can now replicate with LEDs. And so we've installed these Ream halo systems inside of each one of our AC units. It just goes right in the duct. And as air circulates throughout this facility, not just COVID, but any airborne virus is immediately killed. And it just kills it on contact. It is safe. There is no one that's being exposed to it. It's in a confined location. But when you think about it, the air circulates through a building through your air system. And so if you can do something to clean that, and it doesn't involve filtration, it involves cleaning it with light. So it's kind of ironic that we're the light of the world and we're using now light to
I was
make
just
people
thinking
safer.
that. Yes, I was actually
So
just thinking that.
and we're going to see this go into schools. This is going to be something that's coming after COVID, and the church can be at the forefront of this for our entire facility. And it's about an 8,000 square foot building, so it's one of our smaller ones, but it's got about eight HVAC different units in it. I think we spent maybe $2,000 to do that, and now 100% of the time as our HVAC system's working, it's cleaning the air continuously. I mean, that's just a huge value when you think about it. I know $2,000 is not cheap, but when you think about, we're going to use this for years and years to come. Every flu season, we've got greater confidence. Every time that somebody goes into our buildings now and they cough and everybody turns and looks,
Yes,
you know, we've
yes.
got confidence in knowing that, hey, our air is being scrubbed, and that $2,000 is cheap when it comes to that.
Very, very affordable. And one thing that you shared that happened recently is that you guys were granted FEMA, right? 2.1 million. Is that
Yeah,
what?
so that's just one of the grants. So
Wow.
so that grant has finished. It's been released to our the Florida Department of Emergency Management. And so we're right now working with coordination with the state to rebuilding our Panama City Beach location with that. We were one of the first churches in all of America to actually benefit from the program. The Supreme Court ruled several times that churches should be treated just like any other nonprofit. We should not be excluded from any kind of government resources just because of our religious beliefs. And FEMA was finally in 2018 able to give guidance to churches. And it's not an easy process. I don't intend to make it seem like that, but it has been a tremendous blessing to our church and our community, because these dollars aren't about our church. It's about getting these dollars back into our community, that's then in turn helping us to help our community recover from this. And so I would tell no one to shy away from it. I would tell everyone to, yes, it is going to be working with the government, and that is typically not the easiest process. But for us, I think at the end of the day, we'll be somewhere around, I think, $4 to $5 million worth of impact through what we've been able to do, and that's huge. That's
That is huge.
so.
Yeah, that is huge. Yeah, you will have to put a link on this podcast. So if you have any resources that you can give to pastors and leaders, we'd love to include that for the lighting that you've chosen, and maybe
Mhm.
FEMA. But I am thankful that we get to partner with you as Pushpay and Church Community
Mhm.
Builder. And I hope that we've been able to help you guys in some way, during this rebuild and
Just
reaching
a
out to
little
your
bit.
community just a little bit. Well, I hope so. That is our heart. The way you share your heart, that's the heart that we have here. We really want to impact the kingdom. So, do you want to share any ways that we are
I
able to help?
would, and you did not
You
ask me
don't
to do
have
that.
to.
So I would like to share this. We've been church community builder partners for many years. Pushpay was one that we stepped in a little more lightly because it involved a lot of different changes for us. But God's always sovereign in the decisions that we make, and if we're listening to Him, it tends to always work to our good. We made the decision when you guys announced you were combining your companies and efforts that now was the time to make the move. So in January of 2020 is when we made the move and decided to make the move to Pushpay. Little did we know
Wow, right
that
before COVID.
just 3 months later, we were going to be a completely digital church. And that was a huge, huge blessing to our congregation. I cannot tell you how many people came up to me and they said, this is just so easy for me to move over in my giving. And people that had been giving in service for all of their adult life. We're talking about elderly, we're talking about young people, we're talking about everything in between. They were able to easily make the transition over. We would be sitting in a different place as a church had that decision not been made to make giving and supporting our congregate, supporting the efforts that we do as a church as easy as possible. And we do believe that a key part of that was in making the decision to move in the same direction that Church Community Builder did, and let's combine our efforts and do more. And we've been very grateful, and so I would just say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us partner with you. We appreciate you. Well, Josh, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. You're running for council. I appreciate that you took time out today to meet with me. I know that you have overcome so many challenges just in these past few years. And I know you're going to bring encouragement to pastors and leaders that are struggling even right now with reopening, wondering if it's safe. So I'll get that information on just some links that you can share with our listeners. And that way, maybe that'll help them in their journey as they reopen their church as well.
We are in this together, and God is in the business of moving mountains. He created them, He can move them.
Oh, that's powerful. Thank you. Thanks so much, Josh.